All right, let's bring you guys on as quick as I can. There we go. All right, welcome, everybody. There we go. I'm going to have to, as everyone. Oh, now you've listen. I can also go get a scarf, Max. I'm just letting you know.
I just need it for the record, that's all.
You know what? I actually hurt my neck because I was looking so far down the league table to see where you guys
Oh
were that
my
I just.
God. Oh my God.
I mean, it's it's happy times for now, but it's so crazy that little Spurs Arsenal banter. I love it.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you one thing, and then I will shut up on the Spurs stuff. That I have never found any way to support Arsenal. I can't do it. So much so that even when I do fantasy, my rule is no Gooners in my squad. As much as I want to put Aubameyang in, I just can't do it. I can't do it.
Well, we could do this for forever, but that used to be up until this season. That used to be my my running rule for fantasy as well. Is no Spurs. But I got Son on my squad just because he was tearing it up. I had to. I was being selfish, but up until this season, never, not one. But I love, like for some reason I like to do it. Oh, am I on mute? Oh, sorry.
No,
you're good. You're
Oh,
good.
okay.
You're good. I was just doing a little Easter egg wave on
it.
StreamYard because I just ended the show there. I just leave it sometimes on a little bit. But you know what? I mean, listen, Son has been a bit of a revelation. So
Yeah, great player.
all right. So I feel that I'm gonna I don't normally hand off to one person, but Jen, I got to imagine that Max connected with you on so many levels, and I know you had a bunch of questions. So I'll let Jan introduce himself and maybe fire the first silo at the Gooner.
Hey, Max, that was really terrific, and I'm a big fan of your work, and that's because as a creative director, experience, which is really trendy, is probably something that's at the core of a creative director's work if he really knows his job. Decades ago, it doesn't matter. Whereas advertising, which could be an experience, is really just a shallow expression of that, or can be a shallow expression of that, or maybe echoes that experience rather than leads it. So my question to you is, you've probably been in a lot of whiteboarding where the marketing plan has the duty to come up with personas of the customers. And I just wonder, what your sense of that is, maybe in looking back on it, or even just, right now, because my experience with it is that while it could be helpful, it was mostly just shallow. And that's because, as you said in your talk, in one of your things that you said today, that this whole life of a customer and the brand is just too fluid. So to put down on a whiteboard what the persona is of a customer and then go and get her, seems, I just never understood really the great optimistic view of that.
I don't either. I think it's like to your point, Jan, I think it's sometimes useful, but probably more so not, because it's misleading, because it's unnuanced, and it feels like a lot of it is just shorthand to get to work rather than to get to results, right? And so, I mean, I'll put it this way. I think it's a lot more valuable to put a persona on a brand or a business than it is on a customer, right? So I think it's a lot better to say, hey, we're an adventurous, whatever those Joseph Campbell personas that you want to put out there. Whoever, I think it's more valuable to say, hey, we occupied this anthropomorphic territory, and this is how we want to act, and this is how we this is the verb ethos of our brand. When it gets flipped onto the consumer side of the equation, I think it just becomes kind of like a really bad map. So maybe you'll get to the destination, but you'll most likely get lost. And so I don't find a ton of value. There's an interesting just side note that about a year ago, a friend of mine, his name is John Windsor. He's an impresario when it comes to crowdsourcing, disintermediating networks and how to create like cool shit collaboratively. And they were doing a project, I believe it was for Amazon or something. And they basically had a bunch of strategists create a creative brief. And then they had an AI bot that crunched a bunch of Amazon data and created the creative brief. And then they sent it out in a blind survey. I got one of the surveys. As a creative director, which brief would do you find most responsive to? Like, can you work with it? And there wasn't that much, like in terms of the construct of the brief, in terms of like the headings and what to fill in. But the AI brief was infinitely clearer as a creative director, because it actually like had valid data points of purchase behavior, time stamping, like all these like you can get into someone's head if you were like, kind of looking at it like, oh, this person shops at 12:35 a.m., right? Like probably with a couple glasses of wine, probably a little younger, because it can stay up that late, right? Like you could start extrapolating interesting things out of it that can get reevaluated so much more so than if someone just said, this is an inquisitive person who loves a healthy lifestyle, who kind of like, and I think when I talked to John, he said the majority of creatives like the AI brief more than the human one because of that. I wouldn't call it granularity. It's just like, it's another aperture for insights. Whereas the persona aperture it's set, right? Like you don't have that much of an aperture after.
It sounds right, because it takes away a bias of that researcher.
That's right. And that's the other thing. So in a weird way, there's this white paper. Admittedly, I didn't get into it all the way, but I read the synopsis. I will, because I only found it like 3 or 4 days ago. It's called The Empathy Delusion. And Joseph and I touched on it a little bit. It's this notion that like when strategists and market analysts and anthropologists on the payroll or whatever, and creative directors, we talk a lot about like we're more empathetic. We have to encapsulate different viewpoints and still work on the campaign. Like if it's African American, and you still have to work on it, right? And you say like we have a capability for deeper empathy or deeper understanding, et cetera, as creatives. And this white paper purports that like that's actually a bias, right? It's like it's a bias for highly motivated, highly paid, college educated, urban and urbane people, right? Like if you just take a look at it as a big picture. And so when we are quote unquote empathetic, we're really not, right? Like it's and it's a really interesting paradox because we will have to solve it eventually somehow, maybe not in our careers, but maybe in the next 3 or 4 generations of how does this really work? Like how does empathy really?
It doesn't even fit the Oxford Dictionary definition of empathy. To have empathy, you have to be in that person's head.
Exactly, in that person.
So if you're a white dude, Joseph said in soliloquy yesterday, how are you going to do that for a Black or African American, a person of color? You're just bullshitting yourself. You can have sympathy, and you can have you can have projections, and you can have a conversation, but you can't have empathy.
That's right, and and Brene Brown, I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah.
with her. You know, she's got this great like little talk, the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? And what and empathy is like, instead of saying like something bad happens, like, well, at least it didn't happen to that guy, or it'll be okay. Whereas true empathy is like, wow, that must be really hard for you, right? Like there's no fixing, there's no come on for a reaction, there's no like, hey, I just did my part, check the box of sympathy, I expressed my sympathy. Whereas empathy is like, wow, yeah, I feel you, like that, right? And marketing isn't just going, yeah, I feel you, right? It's like, no, let me put ointment on that itch. Let me sell you a master class. You'll feel a lot better if you just get into a Tesla, right? Like we distinguish between sympathy and empathy, and fixing something rather than just being. I think that's kind of like the paradox of it, right? Like how does a brand or a marketer flex empathy genes and be comfortable with not doing anything, right? Without selling anything.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that goes to my other question, but I'll just leave it as to me, that's why so many brands or advertising in general, marketing in general, even experiences possibly aren't trusted, because they're a pretend at being empathic instead of, I think I love your word, instead of a verb, an action that simply is and is there for that person to express themselves, and you're listening to it, period.
That's right. Yep. That's well put.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Interesting stuff. But I want to say something about that. But Max, first of all, I knew it was going to be a good session with two guitar necks in the background there. And what you got? One's an Ibanez, I think.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Ibanez, another is just a favela. It's like a old Spanish flamenco guitar that I can't get rid of it. It keeps
Very
breaking.
cool.
It keeps the strings keep breaking. I just can't get rid of it.
When I was 12, I got my first guitar, and it was a classic guitar made in West Germany called a Framus. My teacher wouldn't teach me unless I had a certain kind of guitar. This guy was a house painter by day, and by night a guitar teacher. And his house, the paint was peeling off his house like you wouldn't believe. He lived next to a railroad track in a tiny little house that needed painting. And people like Chet Atkins would come to Durham, North Carolina to meet with him about their classical guitar albums. So he was ranked right behind Segovia as a classical teacher during the 60s. And so he taught me as a 12-year-old for 3 months until I bought a Sears electric guitar. Then he wouldn't see me anymore because that profaned the instrument, So, but I've got Fenders, and I've got a couple of Strats there, and a Tele on the side. And I knew
there must be something that you two could play right now.
Yeah, right. There you go. Sync it up, But listen, I wanted to jump in before I forget what you and Jan were just talking about.
You're probably just as excited because of Camus.
Yeah, and but Camus, they have that Y in their name. They started with Y, before Simon wrote anything about it. They started with Y at Camus, and that's why they don't pronounce their name in the French way. But the stuff about brands are verbs, not nouns. I put in the chat column, something like so many of the important things are. Mm-hmm. Like love, like hope, like partner. We tend to, a noun when it comes to human life is like a snapshot rather than a film. Mm-hmm. The verb is more like a film. And there's something parallel to that with empathy. Mm-hmm. A lot of people misunderstand empathy because they think of it as essentially a noun, essentially a snapshot frozen in time. But perhaps empathy is best if it's understood verbally as a dynamic process of attempt and correction and adjustment and imagination, so that the superficial empathy, oh yeah, we know what that's like. We know what he's going through. Oh yeah, Black people in America today, yeah, I get it. The simple, almost a dismissal, as if empathy is a really easy thing. as if it's a really simple thing, rather than a deep dive, a process, a dynamic of using your imagination and correcting your imagination and adjusting your imagination and chastening your imagination. Maybe your imagination has to be wounded. Maybe your imagination has to be stretched in a way that you never would have guessed. But as such, empathy is a challenge. It's a quest. It's like the hero's quest. You mentioned Joseph Campbell in another connection. Empathy is this arduous thing that's not just informative, it's transformative.
Yes.
If done right. And that seems to me to be the thing that everybody leaves out, because everybody wants a new catchphrase. Everybody wants a kind of a simple, easy process. Let's be empathetic, as if that's a really easy thing to do. It's a very important thing to do. It's a very powerful thing to do, but mirroring that may be its difficulty.
Whoa.
Joseph has his mute button.
That was
no. This is the goal, Jerry. But I haven't uploaded.
That was a Hendrix riff.
I haven't uploaded the sound yet. But I mean, again, I love what you said about noun versus verb, right? The idea of a noun being a snapshot. That's beautiful. And I also like, I mean, the last thing you were saying there, Tom, is that we've had so many words and terms that have been thrown around and introduced. What today did is it took the word empathy and it really it said, let's really understand what this is. And quite frankly, what Jan was saying as well, which is, what is it and what isn't it? And when can you use it and when can't you use it? So we had the sympathy versus empathy. We said, well, can you really have empathy for an African-American when you say, I know what you're feeling, or I feel, you can have a conversation. So I think if you stitch that together, these are the beginnings of the evolution of demographics and psychographics, the empographics.
Yeah, and we really need to drive a stake through the heart of superficial empathy. Yep. Like we need to do with superficial almost anything else in the world of not just marketing and advertising, but business per se, right?
Except for superficiality, that can stay superficial, right?
Yeah.
Superficiality itself.
Yes.
But everything else.
Maybe we can even find the depth in that. Give me time,
Well, you've got 12 minutes left.
Yeah, but when we were talking about being a movement, I think that's so important. Don't just launch a product, launch a movement, and it's like the advice: don't seek to be the best, seek to be the only. Mm-hmm. And I want to always get beneath the bumper sticker application of such great advice and dig down to the depths of what's really at stake. And if we can help more people to do that, because otherwise we live in a culture of hype and easy slogans, where people almost immunize themselves against the true insights behind something like, what's the difference between a noun and a verb, and what's the difference between a movement and a moment. And there are deep insights that we need to just shake people up until they go to the trouble of really getting to the true insight.
Can I add a question? Does that get compromised by the short attention span that social media has just wreaked upon us? I mean, you're right. It's easy to be superficial when you have 6 seconds, to look to watch something, right? The other comment, and I'd like I don't know, I'm interested to hear your answer to that, but I want to go back to something, and I don't know if it was Jen or Max said this about the changing the aperture for insights. And were you referring to a wider or a more narrow? I mean, was it more important to go wide or go more focused? I was trying to understand what you were saying with that.
My contention is that it's wide.
Wider,
right?
Okay.
Wider and different. And but to go wide, you need to have a tech pipeline, right? Like, so the more you have to capture, the more robust and the more kind of like steroidized way of getting through it, right? Or finding things out. And I think that's kind of like a technical kind of I don't know if it's an example or a statement, but there's also the non one, the idea that like, and I totally agree with you, like the, you know, superficiality is actually a must for a lot of medium, right? Like for a Twitch or for an IG or for whatever, it's the strategy. Like superficiality is the strategy of that,
Yeah.
right? But then there are also other media that, you know, don't need it as much, right? And can flex. And I think there's tons of media yet to be determined from a platform perspective of where more long form content. I mean, you talk about podcasts and how that's just caught on fire, right? That's obviously a you know, kind of a reaction to the 6-second superficiality. The reaction to that is a 60-minute deep dive into the you know, existential crisis of humanity that people listen to every day. And so there is other media, but what I like about the empathy versus sympathy is in the agency dynamic, in the places where this messaging gets made, or you know, gets thought of and then produced. There's very little empathy, probably very little sympathy, because of just the dynamics of the business itself, right? You're running on 11% margins, you're cooking everyone's time, you know, like you're constantly pitching, you don't know when the next client's going to buy anything. So those dynamics naturally get us out of the expansiveness of what the thinking can be, of what the creative can be. It narrows us immediately into moments of time. And I always thought, like, the, you know, like when these campaigns come out, as a former creative director, if whoever that creative director or strategist, whatever that team was, if they were truly empathetic to the work, in terms of empathetic to the people that that work is made for, which 99% of work out there is made for the company, not for the company's clients, customers. It's made for the brand. How, like, if they were truly empathetic, I don't know how they would be able to put it out there in some of the forms that it is, right? Like, I think we would, as creatives and strategists, would agonize over that work in the same way that a Jean-Michel Basquiat or a Van Gogh or a modern artist would agonize over a finished piece before it gets hung up or given to the world, right? There's a curation element and just like a visceral gut that has to go into the work. And 99%, if you're truly empathetic, if you subscribe to that line of creativity, then 99% of the work is just shit, right? Because no one agonizes over it. If they were like, no one agonizes over even the Burger King Whopper stuff that I talked about, right? There's less of that. And I think there's gonna, and I think it's a industry dynamic. But
well, you know, but take that dynamic then to when all that has to get translated to the media buying people. I work in media buying and selling, so you know, I always see, you know, the RFPs that come out with some summary of the creative brief, and they're trying to find their segment. And now with all this programmatic and all the other technology bullshit, it gets narrow, and you never see a segment that says, "I want the empathetic segment." You know, we don't see that. We see, "I want the." You know, name all the demographics, psychographic, technology ownership, you know, all intent data that people have, and they want to find, you know, that group of 20 that are going to, you know, and so this is kind of interesting because I think it's not just what happens on the creative side, it's how it gets translated to the rest of the organization and how they're going to act on it. Because, you know, the media plans that I see, you know, just, you know, they're all about what's good for the company, not about the customer at all. And they don't even really understand the customer because their targeting is so screwed up.
You know, I think ironically, sometimes I think Nike has shown this, when you are really sure about who you are, you know, as a brand. And I understand the problem with doing it from the brand's perspective, not the customers. But if you have a real clear understanding of who you are as a brand and what you stand for, like Nike does, then they just do it for themselves. And whoever can buy into that, like they did with Colin Kaepernick, then they say, join us. And if you don't, fine. But we're not going to try to figure out all of your personas and who's going to like what we're about to do.
I agree. It's like, I would give you another example of like a Tesla, right? Like Tesla has never had a TV commercial ever. They don't sponsor any red carpet events. They don't do anything. They
Well,
know who they are.
the ultimate red carpet was they sent 4 men into space.
That's what I mean. They know who they
Exactly.
are. They are as much of a verb brand as any on the planet right now, like including the Red Bulls of the world. They know who they are. They do their shit, and they understand that there's people who love them, not for the features and benefits of the car, right? Not for like, maybe they love them a little bit for the badge value, although that's kind of faded off in the novelty of it. But they raise their hand and say, yeah, we want to participate in saving the human race, right? Like that's what they like. That's cool, and that's a really wide spectrum. It could be a hunter in Virginia, and it could be like a vet in New York, whatever. Like it's so wide, but they know who they are, and they're talking about like higher level shit about sustainability and interplanetary travel. Like they're not talking about wheelbase and miles per gallon or whatever, or the stereo in their car.
Max, it's interesting. It strikes me that going back to the start with why versus start with who, I'll make another case for start with who, because the start with why relating to purpose, it became so highfalutin and so almost ephemeral, and these were companies that didn't really, that they were trying to aspire towards something that wasn't authentic, that wasn't realistic, that wasn't necessarily even culturally cohesive in terms of who they were. But the start with who in this case, the who is look in the mirror and what do you see, and look inside yourself. The who is the brand. There is an element of that. And in this case, there's a word that I think is more important than purpose, and that's identity. And that's what Jan was saying too, which is first you have to know who you are, to thine own self be true, before you can then start to come up with all your huffery and puffery and create your real-time tweets and try and jump on that why bandwagon. It's almost like, it's what do they say? It's like, industrial machinery. Do not attempt yourself. It should come with a warning.
Right. Well, I think I think it's a great add to the start with who are you? And a friend of mine, Chris Dobson in Hong Kong, he's an experiential design person. He works with really large corporations and smaller ones, but like a lot of like real estate holdings and kind of private equity people and whatnot. And he sees a ton of different business models, et cetera. And he was saying, he's like, if you're still making money the same way you were 20 years ago, you're way behind the curve in terms of who you are, right? Like, so that introspection is really important as well. And I think what COVID is showing a lot is those brands or companies who are verb-based can pivot so much easier than those brands who don't know where to pivot into in order to find another revenue stream or a different customer base or some kind of survival tactic in order to come out of this thriving. And so understanding who you are is critical, and knowing that like in the future, like the way that you kind of see the cultural and socioeconomic dynamics moving and what brands and companies are doing well and what they aren't, the ability to move into different spheres, like from cars to space, like, or from the way that, to tequila. Apparently Tesla's launched a tequila line, limited edition. But the way like, Airbnb in the COVID started Airbnb live experiences where you can go on and meditate with a sheep farmer in Scotland, right? And just like these off the wall, interesting experiences, they were able to do that versus, maybe a competitor like VRBO who doesn't have that understanding of who they are, which is a deliverer of great experiences, not a booking agent or booking engine. They're able to pivot and make a ton of money. The New York Times had a whole article on about a month ago about how Airbnb real experiences, I think they're called, or real virtual experiences, are a great moneymaker for people who are on the content creators, but also for all these people in lockdown who are learning, or, there's a learn how to mime class. There's a walk through medieval Prague, with a GoPro, right? They're able to pivot in crisis because they know who they are. They are a brand verb, and they're all about delivering great experiences.
By the way, no, I was going to say, when I mute Tom Morris, when he talks too much, he looks like he's been doing the Learn How to Mime course, because
And
I can see.
I'm doing some research. Jan says something or Max says something. I go to my Oxford Compact Dictionary. I do an etymological search. I'm keeping you guys honest with.
But with me, I just come up with made up words and acronyms, which is we are at 30 minutes. So Leslie, I'm gonna let you have the last word and be strict to my time limit.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Joe. This has been absolutely great. I have 2 pages of notes. So Tom, you and I have some work to do.
Did you show your notes, Tom?
Oh, it's awesome.
Max, when I get excited, you get some red. When I get really excited, you get yellow. When I'm super excited, you get red and yellow. So you can see.
My comment is, I think there's going to be a lot more of this rethinking of what their business is as COVID has changed already. I mean, it's just like this, and there's ideas out there. Someone said to me, like movie theaters, why do they think of themselves movie? Why aren't they just theaters? Why can't, if you're doing a virtual event and people can't travel, then have, use a physical theater where people can go and you can socially distance and you can have it all over you. There's a theater in every single town in America. I mean, could they network theaters tied into big virtual, like a hub and spoke idea? And those are things I would love to be able to call AMC and say, you're thinking about your business the wrong way, and I don't know. I mean, but I think that will start to happen. I mean, I think people will start to bring, as more, there's going to be more of this creative bundling of ideas and moving the business, what the business is about. I saw it with Viking Cruises. They're now Viking TV show, Viking recipes, there's way beyond a cruise ship.
Viking grills. No, I'm kidding. But the interesting thing, by the way, is when I grew up in South Africa, that's what used to happen when we used to go and see a movie, a matinee, a kids matinee. There was a little stage. They used to do raffles. They used to give away, prizes, etc. That's where you'd have a birthday party. And now, I mean, part of the reason they lost themselves, that's why often, and I certainly say this to marketers, you can appreciate this, Max. I say, if you're trying to discover your purpose, you've already lost. You've forgotten your purpose. You just need to remember it. You need to go back and rediscover it. I mean, if you're trying to look for a purpose now, after 120 years, you're done, man. Stick a fork and put it on the Viking grill, because you're done. So it does come back to going back. And that's the problem with being a franchise or with size and scale. You check that humanity or even empathy at the door. Empathy and size. That's why Max said it best. The real key, if you just go between the lines here, is empathy at scale. Whoever discovers and cracks the code of empathy at scale wins.
Yep.
Period.
Yes.
Now, so Max, I will give you the small print and disclaimer, which is I beg you to become another Tom Morris, even though I say it in a endearing sort of way. You can see, but in all seriousness, we're here every day during quarantine, except on Thursday and Friday of Thanksgiving. But you're always welcome to come back. In fact, as you write the book, if you want to bounce ideas off this little virtual focus group.
What a great idea. No, that's yes. That's done. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you. This was amazing, and I'll send you a couple of emails with like files and links and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Thank you, Max.
So good.
Thank you. Great to